So we have here another Airfix kit, in this case a 1/72 Folland Gnat T.1, which is Airfix kit number A012105, and this is a relatively recent Airfix kit. I think the copyright is 2012, which means that it's definitely one of the more recent high quality Airfix kits rather than one of the more classic Airfix kits that date back to the 1970s and 1960s. I think there was an earlier version of the Folland Gnat which Airfix made either from the late 60s or the early 70s, and this is definitely an improvement on that. So the Folland Gnat was a light fighter designed as a private venture by Folland Aircraft in the 1950s. First flew in 1955 and was adopted by the Royal Air Force as a trainer in 1959 and served through as a training aircraft until 1979, when it was replaced by the British Aerospace Hawk, which remains in service. The fighter version wasn't bought by the RAF but was bought by Finland and India, and also two were bought by Yugoslavia as evaluation aircraft. The Indian Air Force used it in service during wars with Pakistan in the 1960s and was pleased enough with the type to develop an improved version known as the Ajit in the 1970s, which served up until 1991. So the Folland Gnat was certainly a very successful type for its time, with several air forces. But it's also quite well known for service after the end of its military service in the comedy film Hot Shots, which obviously is in the mould of Airplane and similar aircraft. In fact, I think Jim Abrams, who was involved with Airplane, directed Hot Shots and Hot Shots Part 2, the sequel, starring Charlie Sheen and Lloyd Bridges. Obviously a send-up of Top Gun in particular. Very funny films, and the Airfix kit here includes decals for the aircraft as used in the film, known as the Phallus aircraft. The kit doesn't mention the Hot Shots film and presents the option as if it were a real decal, as if it was a real aircraft in service, which is quite deadpan, even if it's for licensing reasons. Okay, so let's take a look inside the box. So what we have inside are two basic sprues. We have the wings, so the top of the wings is a single piece and two undersides. We have the landing gear cover, which comes in a closed and open arrangement. We've got the forward wheel well, which is part of the cockpit floor moulding. Good. We have some wheels and two crew. 2 for the trainer. This is the trainer version rather than the fighter version. I think both versions were used in the Hot Shots film. Then we have the fuselage with some other parts. I'll describe these in more detail in a moment. This doesn't come with it, but I bought this separately. This is an Edward mask. I find these quite useful just to save time and fiddliness picking out the masking tape for the canopy. Speaking of which, this is the canopy. It's packed separately. The sprues come in this plastic bag, but I removed them to clean them with warm soapy water to remove any mould grease. But you can see here the separately packed cockpit canopy, and also I think a light, or perhaps a landing light, is included as well. Single piece canopy, so you can't close it open, unfortunately. We have more recent type of Airfix instructions, which are printed in colour, which include brief history and specification of the aircraft. And we have the decals, which are for an RAF trainer version, and also the Hot Shots markings, which include the Navy rather than US Navy, and black sort of shapes representing rocket pods to attach to the fuel tanks, because they didn't actually use missiles in the film. You can also see there the dealer sticker, which was attached to the aircraft canopy in the film as a visual joke. So let's have a look at the instructions. We've got a typical sort of Airfix instruction front page. We've got some brief specifications and measurements of the aircraft, and a brief history, included in several languages: English, French, German, Spanish and Swedish. We open up the instructions. We have typical brief assembly instructions and some safety information. We start off, as always, with the cockpit building. We have 2 ejector seats included. I'll have a look at those on the sprue. They seem simple, and I'm not sure if resin ejection seats can be bought for this model. We have a decal for the instrument panel, which I'll have a look at on the transfers. We have separate intakes so that they can be moulded overlapping. We have the interior of the undercarriage bay. It's quite detailed for 1/72 scale, and several parts. We have little tubs to represent them, and these slit into the inside of the fuselage. We have options for gear down and gear up. I think I'll make the gear down version. The construction continues with the mating of the 2 fuselage halves, with the cockpit included. It doesn't have you putting the pilots in until later in the building. We have then the attachment of the bottom fuselage with the undercarriage doors for the flying version, and also for a version with the undercarriage deployed. These can be drilled out for a stand. Interestingly, you can also display it on the stand with the undercarriage coming down as if it was coming into land. And then the forward undercarriage is installed. The instructions on the what angle to put the undercarriage legs are also included. Then we have drilling out of the hard points for the fuel tanks, which are optional. Attachment of the wings. The jet pipe is put in at the back. Then the tailplanes, which are perpendicular to the aircraft. The one difference between the Ajit and the Gnat was that the Gnat had separate elevators on the tailplanes, whereas the Ajit had a full moving tailplane to improve agility. These are the fuel tanks / rocket pods, which are then placed under the wings, and as a final step, the pilots are placed inside and the canopy placed on top, and also the pitot tube is added. If I, as I plan to do the Hot Shots version, the pilots will be painted, or one pilot will be placed and then painted to represent Topper, Charlie Sheen's character in the film. So, the 2 decal options. Firstly, we have the RAF trainer from RAF Valley in Anglesey. I used to go to Anglesey on holiday regularly and see the Hawks fly from Valley. This is in the older red, white and grey colour scheme. Red undersides, white markings on the top, and grey for the undersides of the wings. Nowadays they're all in black. And obviously we have the Hot Shots film scheme, and this is the Oscar EW5894 Phallus tactical fighter bomber from USS and the Mediterranean Gulf 1991. And this is a US Ghost Grey overall scheme, which should make painting similar. We've got stars and the bars representing the United States Navy, but instead of US Navy we just have the Navy, and the here you can see the little dealer sticker, as if it was a car being delivered, is attached as part of the film. This is an example of the moulding that we can see on the Folland Gnat here. Generally the moulding quality is quite good, but a couple of places, particularly here on one of the undercarriage bays. There's some scratching visible on the inside here on just one of them. The other one seems okay. If we turn it over, you can see a bit of flash on the same one, so perhaps there's something wrong with this component. We also have here the pitot tube, which is quite flashy as well, and has large mould ejection parts on it. So these parts will need a bit of cleanup, but are otherwise okay. Otherwise, the quality of moulding is pretty good in general, with fairly heavy panel lines, typical of a 1/72 aircraft, but definitely an improvement on the previous kit. The other part I'd like to mention is the jet pipe. You can just about see inside the jet pipe. There's a representation of the exhaust fan of the engine in there, but there's also a little bit of flash sticking out. You can see projecting outwards. I'll see if I can shine a light in there and see what we can see. Yeah, so you can make out the fan in there, and you can see the sort of projection of slightly hollow flash coming out there. So it's a good representation of the fan. Just needs a little bit of cleaning up in there. So in summary, we have a modern, well detailed, nicely sharply moulded kit. There might be a couple of little bits of flash, or perhaps slightly softer moulding on a few of the smaller parts, but nothing too serious that we shouldn't be able to correct during assembly. Very nice boxer, and also the comedy film decal option, which adds a bit of interest, and certainly I hope will lead to additional sales. It was a nice little surprise. I didn't know wasn't really publicised, and didn't know that was the alternative option when I first saw the kit actually in a shop and had a look, and then it was quite a nice little surprise to look at. I'd certainly recommend this kit. Anybody who likes 1/72 jets in particular, and also modellers who also enjoy the kind of slapstick wisecrack comedy we see in Airplane and Hot Shots.